wherever you may be right this morning. Pleased to welcome you to the sermon from Elk Grove Presbyterian Church on this fourth Sunday of Epiphany, January 30th, 2022. My prayer is that each and every one of you, whether it's here or wherever you're watching, will find some blessings in today's sermon is the second in a mini-series based on verses 13 through 30 of the fourth chapter of Luke's Gospel about Jesus speaking in the synagogue of his hometown. Last week we read verses 13 through 22a, which we counted Jesus reading from the prophet Isaiah about the promise of God's redeeming love. Jesus declared that that time had come. And the people were very pleased with what they heard. I gave that sermon the title, Hearing What We Want to Hear. People heard what they wanted to hear. Today's reading is the following verses, repeating verse 22 and then on through verse 30. The title for this sermon, as you saw there, is From Impeccable to Impeachable. We'll see why. Let's listen now for the Word of God, starting with verses that we finished with last week, verse 22 and on. All spoke well of him and were amazed at the gracious words that came from his lips. Isn't this Joseph's son? They asked. Jesus said to them, surely you will quote this proverb to me, physician, heal yourself. Do here in your hometown what we have heard that you did in Capernaum. Just interesting. No, Luke hasn't said anything yet about what he did in Capernaum. Actually, we encounter that the next reading, and I think Luke is just kind of not worried about putting it in chronological order, because this is really the opening statement that he had before us. So, do and hear what you've heard that you did in Capernaum. I tell you the truth, he continued. No prophet is accepted in his hometown. I assure you that there were many widows in Israel in Elijah's time. The sky was shut for 3.5 years, and there was a severe famine throughout the land. Yet Elijah was not sent to any of them, but to a widow in Zarephath in the region of Sidon, which is outside the Jewish territory. And there were many in Israel with leprosy in the time of Elisha, the prophet. Yet not one of them was cleansed, only Naaman the Syrian. All the people in the synagogue were furious when they heard this. They got up, drove him out of town, and took him to the brow of the hill on which the town was built in order to throw him down the cliff. And he walked right through the crowd and went on his way. What is going on? Wanting to hear what we want to hear. Not so keen on hearing what we may need. That's the framework I set out last Sunday for these two sermons that Jesus addressed to his hometown synagogue in Nazareth. An address that set the agenda for really his whole life in ministry. That he would proclaim and demonstrate the good news of God's redeeming love for all people. So, what led Jesus from being thought of as impeccable to his being impeachable, killable? Well, it was the very good news about the breadth of God's love that ruffled the feathers and brought out the anger of those people in the synagogue of Nazareth, just as it would with other properly religious people on through his ministry, who thought God's special love was only for their special group, those who believed that they were in God's in-group, while all others were outsiders. That sounds kind of familiar, right? Tribalism is a term we've heard so much of in the last 20 years or so, most often in reference to a land such as Afghanistan, where the only group that really matters is your own group, where the only truth to be believed is the truth espoused by the leaders of that group. almost no sense of national identity. Sounds to me a lot like current affairs in our own country. More and more, it seems that people only want to hear, listen to the voices that reinforce what you already believe. Whether what the person already believes is based on truth and reliable facts or not. Whether the voices a person listens to is telling the truth or not. Someone has said, when it comes to the contest between emotions and facts, emotions win out every time. Think about just some of the absolutely crazy stuff that has been put out there about vaccines and masks. Crazy stuff that far too many people have taken as true with terrible results. Okay, back to Nazareth. Jesus had first read a part of Isaiah about God's redemptive work. He said that seemed really to have pleased the people, is what he said. They heard what they wanted to hear. Then he said some things that really upset them so much that they wanted to kill him. So, 3 questions I want us to think about today. What did he say that upset them? Why did he choose to say what he must have known would upset them? How did he manage to escape that ruthless crowd? Okay? What did he say? Well, remember that last week Luke recounted how he read from the prophet Isaiah, words from their sacred scripture and tradition that seemed to please them all. All spoke well of him and were amazed at the gracious words that came from his lips. This morning, we read how he recalled for them what their prophet Elijah and Elisha had done. He got a very different response, didn't he? He reminded them that Elijah had helped a Phoenician widow who was not a Jew. He reminded them that Elijah's successor, Elisha, helped a captain in the Syrian army. He was how dare Jesus remind those people in that synagogue that Jews were not the only people God cared about. That Israel was not the only land on which God showered blessings. They wanted to hear that God, their God, was literally that, their God. That they had an exclusive patent on God. During my time working for Sacramento's Interfaith Service Bureau, I like to say that the people from all of our different faiths, Christians and Jews and Muslims and Sikhs and Hindus, on and on, we might all say, we are all the children of one God. Even if we really believe that Daddy loves me. Jesus was poking at their self-righteousness. He was holding a mirror up to them because they needed to take a hard look at themselves. Just like we don't like it if someone reminds us of our imperfections. I don't like it when someone points out my faults. I can get pretty defensive pretty quick. That's a kind of a gut reaction. That ever happened to you? And what happens when we get defensive and don't want to hear what we really need to hear? Well, this week I tried to respectfully mention to a lady in the parking lot where parking is that she had been parking in someone else's slot. And, you know, I just thought, well, I will go over and mention that to her. That it was told her, gently. It was good if she would check out the person who owned that slot before she parked there. Guess what happened? And why are you telling me this? I said, well, because I think it's good for neighbors. Take care of each other. Well, I don't think you have any right to be telling me what I should do. She obviously didn't like being caught in the act. She went on the attack. If you don't like the message, attack the message, right? So no value in trying anything further. Figured that was the end of it. Haven't seen her parking in that place in the last week. We don't like someone pointing out our imperfections. Richard Rohr, who I've quoted quite often, writes about necessary disillusionments. We like our illusions, don't we? The little or maybe not so little untruths we like to hold about ourselves, about the church, about our nation. And it can be good to be disillusioned of our illusions. It's good to take off the blinders that we can wear so we only see what we want to see. The gospel of Jesus Christ says God's love can free us to take a good hard look at ourselves, to take off our blinders. And the gospel says that the light of God's love can allow us to take a good look at the dark places in our personalities and interactions. And that the power of God's Spirit can help us work on those dark places. Those people in Nazareth weren't willing to hear what they needed to hear. They didn't like the message, tried to get rid of the message. I'll go to my second question. Why did Jesus tell those people something that he undoubtedly knew was something? I mean, he seemed to be going along pretty well. He seemed to have a pretty receptive audience. They were amazed at the gracious words that came from his lips. Was there something else in that crowd that Jesus sensed? Maybe so, and maybe there's a little hint in this next word that Luke wrote. Isn't this Joseph's son? Sounds benign enough, right? I found Matthew's account of the same incident found in Matthew 13 really helpful in this regard. Matthew places the incident quite a bit later in Jesus' ministry after many healings, telling of many parables throughout Galilee. So now Matthew writes, when Jesus had finished these parables, he moved on from there. Coming to his hometown, he began teaching the people in the synagogue, and they were amazed, much like what we heard in Luke. And Matthew reports, where did this man get his wisdom and those miraculous powers, he asked? Isn't this the carpenter's son? So far, so good. Seeming. But then, isn't his mother's name Mary? And aren't his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? Aren't they his brothers? Aren't his sisters with us? Where then did he get all these things? And they took offense. Jesus said to them, only in the home, in his hometown, is a prophet without honor, and he did not do many miracles there because of their unbelief. What a different kind of sense we get of what was going on. In Matthew, no one trying to throw him off the cliff, but the same self-righteous indignation of those people. It can be hard to hear what a person has to say, what we need to hear. And if we are already dismissed a person, why should we listen? Putting a label on someone allows us to discount whatever they say. It's of no value. Yeah, that seems to me to be a lot of what's going on in our nation. No one need to pay attention to what they say, because after all, they're just fill in whatever blank you want to fill that in. I think it's clear that Jesus seemed to sense that those people in that synagogue, or at least a certain group of them, Luke uses a couple of times the word all the people. But that is, at least a small group didn't want to hear about God's good news. As we know, it often takes only a few negative people to pollute the water for everyone else. I've been invited to sit in on a listening session tomorrow night at Good Shepherd Roman Catholic Church. All I know is that this is a part of a worldwide process that Pope Francis initiated to listen to the baptized about their perspectives on the Catholic Church. We seem to be signaling that it's important to listen to what people have to say. That's a pretty radical step for the Roman Catholic Church. Thank God. So on to my final question. How did he manage to escape? Luke simply says that he walked right through the crowd and went on his way. I certainly find it very easy to believe that the very presence of power of those people just backed away. But I wonder if there's another possibility as well. Maybe someone or some others played an important part in that exit of that crowd. Matthew's account, remember, included the mentioning of Jesus' mother, brothers, and sisters. Were they there in that crowd? Did Mary and her sons and daughters stand firmly with Jesus at some point? Mary looked some of those trouble causers in the eye, straight in the eye, caused them to lower their eyes. Did she and her family start the movement right through that crowd? People stepping back in embarrassment and shame for what they were thinking. Sheer speculation, absolutely sheer speculation. Is it a possibility? Perhaps. We know that there are lots of things that are not said in the scriptures that we don't think. But key takeaways for me from this morning's reading, what I believe these are absolutely true. That the gospel calls us to be willing to hear what we may need to hear. As painful, as difficult as that may be at times. The gospel calls us to stand firmly together, truth, and honesty. The gospel calls us to work for peace and community. The gospel calls us to reach out with love, and graciousness, and hope. All thanks be to God.